Good evening on this warm July evening, and welcome to the Parks and Recreation Commission and Urban Forestry Board meeting of July 1st, 2024. I'll now call this meeting to order. There we go. First time with the gavel. I'm Jonathan Davis, sitting in for our chair, Sandy Sommer, and I've got three other commissioners who will assist me if I need it. I now call this meeting to order. This meeting is being conducted with a virtual component. Anyone wishing to address the commission virtually may join the meeting online at https://j//j.zoom.us/j/850-274-81875. Or by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering the webinar ID 850-2748-1875. When the chair announces the item on which you wish to speak, click the raised hand feature in Zoom or dial *9 on your phone. When the chair calls your name to provide public comment, if you're participating via phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Allison, may I ask you to conduct the roll call?
Commissioner Bryant.
Here.
Commissioner Felios.
Here.
Commissioner Mitchner.
Here.
Vice Chair Davis.
Here.
And Chair Summer is absent.
All right, item number 3 on the agenda is the recommendation for approval of the minutes from the June 12th, 24 meeting. Are there any comments from commissioners? Mr. Mitchell?
No comments, and I would move that we approve those minutes.
Any
No
comments?
comments, and I'll second the motion.
All right.
I'll have to abstain because I was not at that meeting.
All right. The only comment I will make regarding the minutes in the meeting is I think we had nearly almost 30 participants virtually and in person. And we had people presenting both sides of arguments, and we did so in a very civil way, and it made me proud to be a resident of Mountain View. That's all I have to say. Before we vote on that, are there any comments from the public? We'll take the online participants first. Allison, anybody with a raised hand? All right. Does anybody here in attendance have comments regarding the minutes at this time? All right, with that, I think we have a motion and a second. Allison, you can conduct the roll call.
Commissioner Bryant.
Yes.
Commissioner Felios.
Abstain.
Commissioner Mitchner.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Davis.
Yes. So I think that passes. Okay, agenda item 4 is oral communications from the public. And this portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter that is not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and state law prohibits the commission from acting on non-agenda items. Are there any people online that wish to provide comments?
We have one hand raised.
All right, and we have a name.
Katie Zoglin.
Katie Zoglin, if you would unmute yourself, and you're welcome to address the commission.
Hi, good evening. My name is Katie Zoglin. As you heard, I'm a long-term resident of Mountain View. I just wanted to address the pickleball court issue. There was one option that I really did not hear discussed at any length during the last meeting. And I didn't know if you guys, before I saw the agenda, I thought you might be discussing it tonight. But one is a project along the lines of what Los Altos has been doing with a pilot project in which there are a number of the tennis courts that are shared between pickleball players and tennis players. And they also have 2 evenings a week where pickleball players can play at the Egan Junior High School auditorium. So I just wanted to raise that issue just because I didn't hear it discussed at the last meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Augland. Appreciate your comments. Anybody else online?
That's it.
Okay. Are there any comments on non-agenda items from the attendance of the meeting? And if you pull out a blue card, say it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Rogers. I spoke at the last meeting. I've been a former president of the Mountain View Tennis Club, and instructor in the junior team tennis, some other things. I'm involved in other bodies with the County of Santa Clara. I wanted to talk about tennis and pickleball a little further following the commission's discussion because we got to talk at the beginning of the meeting. There was one direction coming out of this to look at taking down the tennis wall in Cuesta Park, and the tennis community feels very strongly that at this point, 5 years into these temporary solutions, we're now going down the path of looking at cannibalizing another critical part of the tennis community facilities. The tennis wall is probably used as much for tennis as any court at Cuesta Park. I play at Cuesta Park a few times a week, play all over the South Bay. Tennis, I use it for junior team tennis during league play. We send people over there because the courts are full before their matches because we do a sequence of matches. Right. So I think it's very important that the city really acknowledges the current usage model. So far, all of the stuff we've done has ignored the inputs of the tennis community. So ignored the most used courts for recreational players by cannibalizing the Rangsdorf Park courts for purpose of the noise issue. When those courts, geometrically, they're 40 units right on top of those courts. Right. It was a complete disregard to the physical nature of courts and the usage models to do that. But another thing that hasn't been discussed is we're 5 years into these temporary solutions. What the tennis community wants to know is when are these facilities going to be returned to the tennis community? When does the Mountain View Tennis Club get the courts back? When does the wall come back at Rangsdorf, right? You really need to have 10 to 16. We're strong advocates for building as many pickleball courts as you can. I actually submitted a drawing, which I didn't get discussed, which used a part of the existing courts that are not used. The stands on the far side, courts 6 and 12 have half the space
I
you
found
need
this on the web.
that are used. That would be half the space for 8 courts. If you went a few feet in the annex, you could put 8 courts right there, integrate it to the existing facility. And I also, in the same drawing, I put 8 more courts next to the tennis wall, adjacent to courts 5 and 6. So it's very contiguous to everything else without the minimal green space taking out. But that's a key question is when does the temporary solutions go away, right? We're not temporarily going to take out the wall at Cuesta, right? That's going to be going on for many years. It'll be the last wall we have left. And it's probably one of the most used parts of the facility. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, when we look at these issues, people brought up this, as part of the strategic plan, which is on the agenda, but as part of pickleball and tennis, we need to look at the pricing. Mountain View Tennis has increased the price for walking courts and destroyed the community tennis model over there. Community recreational players don't go there because there's a 600% increase in pricing. Several tennis players made the point, if you do that with the pickleball courts, you're going to have the same issue, right? Don and Jerry Schaefer, who ran the rec department, built all the programs for decades, were really adamant about keeping the prices low. I used to argue with Tom Means, San Jose State professor of economics, but city council member who insisted on, we have to have a cost recovery model. The point is we invest as a community in recreation for the benefit of our citizens, not to look at what's the revenue recovery model of a jungle gym or a dog park.
Thanks, Mr. Rogers.
Thanks for your time.
Very much appreciate your comments. That was 3 minutes. Thank you. Any other comments from the public here? Okay, agenda item number 5 is an update on the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan from staff and consultants. We'll turn it over to Assistant Director Christine Crosby to kick things off.
All right, thank you so much, Vice Chair Davis and Commissioners. Thank you for this attending tonight's special meeting for this presentation on the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan. As you are aware, we provided 2 community meetings last week that presented the findings from the community input and assessments. And here with me this evening, I have Neelay Bhatt from Next Practice Partners and Deeksha Rawat from WRT, who will share a presentation of their findings. And I will hand it over to Neelay.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. Good evening, everybody. I can't believe I'm saying this. It's already July. My goodness. But here we are, and it's nice to see some of you again. It was good to see you all in person last week and to again see you all virtually here. Do I have permission to share my screen?
Give us 1 second.
He should be able to.
You should, yeah, give it a shot and see if it works.
Okay, let me do that.
I think that's better.
All right. Can you all see it?
You can.
Yes.
Okay. All right, here we go. So just a brief background. Obviously, you know us with Next Practice Partners, WRT, that's local as well, along with us. And for consistency's sake, we're going to share the same presentation that we've shared with the community as well. So some of you that may have been in attendance at the public meeting, you would have seen this. We want to share these findings, the process up to this point, talk to you about what's to come as well. And of course, continued opportunities for the PRC and the community to be engaged and to give us your input as we go along. So a recap in terms of the project schedule thus far, starting from last summer, we've had a number of initial, from the kickoff standpoint, a number of initial discovery meetings, multiple pop-ups as well, 3 different ones, including at Shoreline's 40th anniversary, a number of focus groups, thought leader and key leader interviews, intercept surveys as well, and additional meetings, one specifically just in Spanish language focus group, another just in Mandarin as well. And a number of our meetings, including the most recent we had last week, were either bilingual or multilingual as well. And this most recent one had attendees listening to the meeting in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. In addition to all this input, we had then crafted statistically reliable surveys, as well as an identical version of that to be administered online as well. And I'm curious, did anyone in the meeting get this randomly chosen survey? Did I see a hand raise up? All right. Okay, great. So wonderful, and I'm optimistic you did take that as well. So thank you for doing that. And for those that again were not randomly chosen, that's really where the online survey through imaginemvparks.com helped more folks to be able to participate in the input process. All that led to the findings presentation that we did in person and virtually last week. And that's really where we are now. And so you can see the next steps as well. This fall, we're going to be working with the staff to co-create the draft levels of service and equity maps, the recommendations, including the capital improvement plan that will come out of it. Ultimately, the vision and action plan, which will lead to a draft report, a final plan development, and ultimately the adoption as well. And along the way, there will be multiple avenues just like this for us to continue sharing the findings, getting the input as well. So as we get to the very end, there are no surprises. So with that, a quick recap of all the public input summary up to this point in time. I have to give a shout out to the staff. They have been incredible, both community services as well as the citywide too, in getting the word out. Because for a city, your population, this is a fin engagement already, right? 3,200 plus engagements across in person, online, the website, the pop-ups. And we're not even counting the number of people at the public meetings. We're simply saying 6 public meetings, but that right there, on average, had anywhere from 40 to 60 plus people at each of the meetings. And so again, the community has shown up. The staff and the team and all of you have done great work in getting the word out. And, you know, we saw all along the way as well, including at several meetings, just how engaged the community was of all ages in telling us in word, in pictures, in stickers, in drawings, what they would like to see as the future in Mountain View and why parks matter. So what I'm about to show you after this is the summary of just the subjective stakeholder input thus far. It is not a statement of fact. It is not a policy recommendation. It simply is a reflection of the input we got from the community as a summary of all the different meetings and just from who showed up. So some quick things here in terms of strengths. The community really appreciated the quality and the variety of the parks, the ability for it to target all ages as well, from the community centers to the senior centers, how well maintained they are, how responsive the staff is in continuing to meet the community where they are, engage them as well, the dedication, the passion, the knowledge of the staff as well. And similarly with programs too, for a number of spaces, offering the low quality program offerings that allow maximum access, that serve a broad age group, and a number of adult recreation offerings as well. The flip side of this with the opportunities, a huge part, and you all have heard this in multiple meetings too, accessibility to the parks from various neighborhoods, as well as ADA access were certainly brought up by the community. And again, we know the city is already working on an ADA audit as we speak. With infrastructure, a number of older facilities where appropriate safety lighting, where restroom access can be maximized, and additional just options to walk, bike as well. And again, ensuring just safe, accessible routes. Programmatically too, and in terms of amenities, shade and trees and shade structures came up a lot, as did community gardens and just a variety of recreational spaces. And then again, continuing to build on what the staff's already been doing is increasing and maximizing engagement, both through community events and overall outreach with the non-English or the non-native English speaking population as well. And then lastly, in this case, and y'all have already spoken about this at a number of times, looking at partnerships, both with the schools, the developers. How do we maximize the limited space that you have as well for a variety of activities, and then do it all in a way that is environmentally sustainable, prioritizes native trees and landscape as well, and maximizes uses while keeping that balance between active and passive open space. So these were the opportunities, and the last question was the one top priority outcome. What would people most want to see from the strategic plan? And that's where funding, as you all know as well, from cost of land acquisition to development to maintenance, that's going to be a sizable lift. And what do those viable long-term funding sources look like? Access to parks, walkability, especially connecting the mini and neighborhood parks, having the neighborhoods have access to parks as well, improving what you already have, both in terms of parks, sports fields, etc., and ensuring that the amenities are all both accessible and environmentally resilient. Shade, the tree canopy cover all across streets and neighborhoods, more fields, dog parks, and as I alluded to earlier, the native landscape areas certainly came up very high. And then as you do all of these things, ensuring that the parks continue to reflect the community they serve, the offerings are welcoming, people feel safe, they feel like they belong, continuing to maximize outreach and having more cultural events and gathering opportunities as well as partnerships. So all these were, again, just the subjective input. These were then used to craft the statistically reliable survey. The survey questions were fairly similar to what's asked nationwide so that we have some ability for benchmarking. The choices, however, were all tailored to Mountain View based on the information we heard from all these different community responses. So as a part of this, it was mailed through households across the city. Usually, 10 or 12% response rates, pretty good for these. So a few thousand were mailed across the city. And as we see here, 95% level of confidence, 4.6% plus or minus margin of error. This means that if we do this repeatedly, the results we see are 95 out of 100 times within a margin of error of plus or minus 4.6%, which is really what makes this reliable, because it also, in addition to the random anonymization part, reflects the demographics of the community. So ESRI is Environmental Systems Research Institute, and that looks at census data and population tracks. ETC Institute is who actually did the survey. And you can see with the exception of the ages 14 to 20 to 34, which is 14 to 23% difference, all the others are within a very close margin of ETC sample reflecting the actual city's demographics from an age standpoint. From a gender standpoint, almost identical as well. Within the ESRI population, it is just under 1% for the non-binary population. So ESRI's numbers are rounded up as well, but they're fairly similar to the actual ETC sample. And then from a race and ethnicity standpoint, do slightly higher respondents with the white alone population, marginally lower with the Asian population, and identical for the Hispanic Latino ethnicity. So in general, as you can see with all of this, the ETC sampling is a very close approximation and reflection of the actual community demographics. That's what makes this representative of all your constituents and ensures that this is a statistically reliable scientific process. So some of the quick questions here, folks were asked, how many, counting yourself, how many people in your household are in what ages? Now, I'm not expecting 6 and 7-year-olds to take a multiple page survey, but I certainly expect that if Christine has taken the survey, she's going to be thinking of her kids and responding to what might Parker want to see, for example, in the parks as well, right? So that's really where all these different age segments are reflected. In terms of visitation in the last 12 months, outstanding numbers. National average is 76%, about 3 and 4. In Mountain View, it's almost everybody, right? 96%, which is incredible numbers. And in terms of frequency, pretty high frequency. Christine, were you going to say something?
No.
Or was someone else? Okay.
Yeah.
So in addition to the high visitation, also a very high frequency of visitation. Only 14% went less than once a month. 86% went multiple times a month, if not multiple times a week. And with the frequency, they also rated the parks significantly higher compared to national averages as good or excellent. What I've said in every meeting, including to the staff, is in the spirit of continuous improvement, we would recommend that in the next 5 to 10 years, can you aspire to shrink the percentage of people that say good while growing the ones that say excellent, right? What would that take to keep raising the bar? Because that's really the area to focus on. As you see, the poor is 0.5%, which in this case might be the 1 or the 2 people that probably were not very happy. In terms of barriers to participation, shade and restrooms were by far the number 1, right? 1 in 5, more than 1 in 5 said shade, 1 in 5 said restrooms, 17% said lack of amenities, which in some ways is directly related to the 13% that may be using parks or facilities in other cities or the county. Only 7% said don't feel safe or not aware as well, which is much lower than national averages in all of these cases. So these were the primary barriers from a park and recreation facility visitation side. With respect to program participation, these were just phenomenal numbers. As we've done these plans, and for 20 years now, having done this and looked at it, we recommend that the best of the best agencies aspire to get to 40% as a part of their plan. You're already higher than that, which is wonderful, right? So again, the goal is how do you keep raising the bar in this case as well? And not only do they participate in high numbers, they rate them exceptionally high as well. So as people come, they love what you provide. And I'll say the same thing here again. Can we shrink the good and grow the excellent, right? So that's going to be some of the goals as we think of future targets in the visioning process. In terms of barriers to participation, in this case, number 1 was too busy or not interested. They're either, busy watching the Euros or Copa or streaming Bridgerton on Netflix, who knows, right? That's not something the staff can control. But the things we can control are, I don't know what is offered, program times not convenient, which are both rated by at least 1 in 5 people. The program I want is not offered. Fees and classes are just 12%, so significantly lower. Now, just so you know, the lack of awareness, I don't know what is offered nationally, that's rated at about 33%. So our outreach and communication is absolutely outstanding. And yet there's just so much noise out there. There's so much competition for people's attention that there are going to be people that just don't know what's going on, right? So those are things that we can control in terms of awareness and in terms of identifying timings as well. One, for what's not offered and when is it not offered, that we could certainly look at in terms of raising participation and maximizing overall access to recreation in the community. So if they had $100, where would they want to spend the money? The top two: improve existing parks, pools, and facilities, and acquire and build new parkland and or open space as well. That made up almost half of all spending, followed closely by amenities to existing parks, pools, and rec facilities, program offerings, enhancing landscaping with native and biodiverse plantings, and other. So how important do they feel? Very important. Probably the same one person that rated the parks as poor said, you know what, I don't really care. We can have terrible parks, facilities, programs. That's not very important to me. But everyone else at least said it's somewhat, if not very important. And seeing this through the pandemic and seeing this nationwide, there has been a somewhat or a significant increase in the perception of value of parks, trails, open spaces, and recreation. People have certainly been seeing this more and more as essential to the physical, mental, emotional, social well-being and a sense of community than they probably did ever before. And based on that, they would want to increase the funding. Same 1%, reduce the funding too. Parks are not important, doesn't matter. A majority want to increase the funding. And look, it's easy to say all these things and say, you know what, this is important to me. The city should increase the funding. I want to spend the money, allocate the money this way. But then the question was, are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? Are you willing to pay more per household per month to fund all of these things? And only 21% said no. Nearly 80%, almost 4 in 5 people said they'd be willing to pay anywhere from $3 to $4 more, to the largest chunk of people saying I'm willing to pay $9 or more per month per household to fund all of these. This is an incredible level of support, folks. We are very optimistic when we see these even at about 2/3, 65, 70% is a great number. Almost 80% is wonderful. And it is a point in time. So we're not saying this is how it's going to hold. This is an encouraging sign as you look at the implementation of the plan. If you look at public funding and public support, you definitely do want to be doing some specific targeted polling at that time. But this is a very, very encouraging sign, because the flip side of this is if the level of support, which in your case is nearly 80%, if that number has been less than 65%, I've never seen a referendum pass. Right? So that's a good indicator in this case of where the community's support lies. And then ETC ran the priority investment ratings based on this combination of what is important, what is a need, and is the need currently met or unmet. So that led to a cluster of high, medium, and low priorities for facility amenities as one category and programs as the other. And so these were all the facility amenities that were ranked as high priorities: trails, small neighborhood parks, large community parks, trees, shaded picnic areas, restrooms, bike and pet access, more shade structures, native habitat and landscaping, swimming pool and walking paths and parks. So all of these were at that time high priorities. a large number of these, as you can see, from safety lighting to both tennis and pickleball courts, to dog areas, to environmental education, benches, performing arts, game tables, plazas, were all medium priorities. And then outdoor basketball, skateboarding, and lighted diamond sports fields were the low priorities. In terms of programmatically, these were all the ones: community and cultural special events, adult and 55 plus fitness and wellness, rec swim, water fitness and lap swimming, cultural enrichment, exercise classes, outdoor environmental education and nature camps. And more recently, I'm seeing these to be higher priorities, which is counseling and mental health programs. I think for all ages, even more so, especially for the youth, this has certainly been a higher need, and a lot more agencies have stepped into that. Obviously, a number of medium priorities, from pickleball lessons and leagues to performing arts to visual arts, trips, STEM, teen programs, swim lessons, martial arts, at-risk youth and crime prevention, and so on as well. And then lastly, these were more of the low priority programs in that as well, from youth seasonal to cheer, gymnastics, tumbling, to 55 plus sports leagues, to e-gaming, esports, etc. So then we did a comparison of the surveys, and I'm not going to go through every single result of the online only survey. But what was really encouraging was how well, again, the community showed up. Almost 1,400 responses across 4 languages, a lot of English, obviously, a lot of Spanish, Mandarin as well, a few Russian, available through most of April. And because of this large sample size, the overall responses in this case were actually quite similar to the statistically valid survey responses, right? So the larger the sampling, the less chances for a few individuals to skew that as well, or a certain interest to skew that. So from that standpoint, this was one very heartening to see, and just again a validation of the statistically valid survey and additional input specifically from the community. Program assessments, a quick sort of snapshot. In addition to all the discovery, these were the 10 core program areas that staff identified, provided us the data, which we assessed as well. And as a part of that, provided initial recommendations in terms of volunteers, marketing, program management, life cycles, and so on. Here's a couple of them in terms of the age segments served. You can see virtually every age segment is served by a number of program areas, from aquatics, sports, special events, etc. And some of the others are obviously very age specific as well. And then from a life cycle standpoint, it's really encouraging to see only 5% of your program are in the declined or canceled stage, which is much less than national averages. You have a lot of new programs that are launched and rising. You have a lot of them that are stable as well. So overall, your actual distribution is much healthier and much more in line with what the community wants you to offer. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Deeksha to talk about their assessment of the parks.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. So in fall 2023 is when we went on site to assess all the parks and trails that are in the Mountain View system. Like we shared earlier, there were 4 broad assessment categories that we were looking at: access and connectivity, park conditions, functionality, safety, and comfort. And there was a scoring scale of poor, fair, good, and great. That multiple categories within these broad categories were assessed under. And so moving to the next slide, we walk through some of the key takeaways that we came across while doing this assessment. Under access and connectivity, we looked at primary signages, secondary signages. The primary signages were well marked. There's some scope for secondary signages from smaller streets for the park entrances. Also, in some of the bigger parks, having more internal signages and directions for the parks would be helpful. Improved accessibility requirements for older parks within the system. We did not do a complete AD assessment because the city is undertaking a different one altogether. Another accessibility point that we were looking at is how well is the park connected into the sidewalk system, the crossings, etc. So on the bottom right, you can see where we have a mid-block crossing near a park frontage. So assessing whether, for example, if it's a neighborhood park or a community park, whether how close is the access from across the street. For a mini park, that might be at an intersection. Moving from there, looking at access at a 10-minute walk. This was including school sites. So this was the overall 10-minute walk access, which looks at the street network in detail for Mountain View. And then, but there is limited access to the school sites. So we did another one which removed the school sites which have limited access. So that was the second one that you're seeing right now, which has slightly more gaps than the first one that we looked at. As we go further into our study, when we go into the recommendations phase, we'd look at the discrepancy within like mini park access and neighborhood park access, because they have different kind of amenities that are offered to community members. In functionality, we looked at shade was the biggest thing that came up in functionality. So having more shade and tree canopy, especially around like play areas for kids, having multi-generational park amenities, especially in mini parks, adding more things than just the playgrounds that we tend to see. In condition, most of the parks are in good condition. The thing that we're starting to see is that there is aging infrastructure, which we might want to consider whether we're looking for a replacement one-to-one, or whether we start thinking of other amenities that we want to add side by side to it. The vegetation currently is well maintained, except for a few places where you were having gophers issues or some lawn that didn't look very well done. But moving forward, looking at more of diverse planting, especially from what we're hearing from the community. And safety and comfort was looking at whether there are derelict uses around the park, which would make people feel unsafe, lighting conditions. For lighting, we did consider that only the parks that are supposed to stay open after sunset, and parks that are supposed to have some sort of pedestrian connectivity post after hours. I think that's Rainstraw is the only one that we have for that one. But thinking of sensitive lighting in strategic parks as we move forward, to be more nature sensitive, but also add a level of safety and comfort for people in general.
Thank you, Diksha. So just some next steps from here on as well. Of course, there are ongoing reviews going on with the staff too. In the coming weeks, we will be looking at draft recommendations for a variety of different, amenities, parks, open spaces, programs, which will lead to the vision and strategy, the eventual action plan, obviously continued presentations to you all and the community and getting your feedback. And the goal right now is for the adoption of the plan in the first quarter of 2025. So just a final recap of the next steps, where we are right now in summer and leading into what's to come over the next 6 to 8 months. I do want to give you all a sneak peek into something that is being worked on right now, and that's the draft levels of service and the equity maps. This is where staff is and has done a lot of work in trying to document and capture the inventory that currently exists within the city, that both the city itself has, the other service providers as well, including the schools, and how best to account for that, not at the same level as the city inventory might be, and ensuring that there is still some reflection of the fact that there is limited access as well to a variety of school sites or other service providers, all of which then leads to individual equity mapping that depict access gaps and overlaps by every single amenity and park type. And this is, again, very much in draft. Wanted to give you all a sneak peek here. This is an example of dog parks, and these are based on population standards that are customized to Mountain View. So it accounts for density of population, not just distance. And the rings around it in concentric circle show you how much is served and where the gaps lie based on current population. And I know, for example, with neighborhood and mini parks, you already have some parks that are in the works. Those are not accounted for yet. But as you can see with some of the other amenities, we've got the pools and 2 bodies of water at Ringstorff. So they are, again, essentially overlapping circles here. Skate parks, pickleball courts, tennis courts, where you can see some areas of overlaps, other areas of gaps. And then the easiest map we've had to do so far, splash pads. Again, this allows all of us, as we think of it for the future, to think of land acquisition, to think of partnerships and development, etc., in ways that are, 1, practical, and 2, financially feasible as well from the city standpoint, and something that can actually get implemented. So we're going to be finalizing these levels of service, then the equity maps, looking at assessments from WRT and what Deeksha reported, the capital improvement plan as well, and then the vision, strategy, and action plan. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and happy to answer any questions you would have.
Assistant Director Crosby, do
Yes.
you want to weigh in on anything before I turn it over to Commission for comments?
Thank you for the opportunity. No, I just want to thank both Nilay and Deeksha for being here this evening, especially Nilay being 3 hours ahead of us and staying up late for this meeting. But other than that, the floor is yours.
So now we'll take comments and questions from the commission. Commissioner Filios, may I start with you?
Sure. I was curious, Neely, on the survey with regards to program participation part of it. Did it include, like, at the senior center or the teen center or the golf course, where a lot of that is drop-in? It is not, sign up ahead of time, but are those people counted within program participation as best as possible?
Yeah, good question. I think the last part is right. It's as best as possible because this is self-reporting, right? So for somebody going to the senior center, if they account for their participation or their visitation at the senior center or the golf course as I have participated in a program and they've answered yes, then that is accounted for. I would also imagine that the question before that was, have you visited any parks, facilities, recreation spaces in Mountain View? And I would certainly imagine that the 96% of those that said yes would also include all these folks.
Thank you on that. The second one I had were, we have some programs where we work with the school district that the city is providing funding for after-school programs. And I was wondering, is that included when we talk about our inventory? Are they accounted, those type of programs, especially the after-school programs, accounted for in the findings?
Yeah, so go ahead, Christine.
Would you like me to take this one? When we put together the inventory of all of our programs for the program assessment piece, the 2 after-school programs that we work in collaboration with the school district was included in that. So the first one is the Beyond the Bell after-school site, which is available at 5 school sites, and then the Beat after-school site, which is available at Graham Middle School. In addition, any other program where we do some sort of collaboration in general was listed on the program assessment.
Okay, thank you. Those were the 2 that came to mind. I might think of others later.
All right, well, we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, so my questions are more in the nature of comments, so I'm assuming that after the public hearing, we will come back to more comments. So I'll look for that. All right.
I'm similar to Commissioner Bryant. I think mine would fall more in the area of comments, but I did have one question. If you could bring up the slide on the equity maps with tennis courts. There was one part that felt you could bring that up. Because I love these equity maps. I love the graphic of it. I guess I was puzzled by something. You could bring up tennis courts. Yeah, how, on the bottom right, how one circle could fit within another circle if they're both 25,000 member, it would just, I mean, maybe there's some reason, that seemed,
In per court, so the circle gets bigger because there's a ton of courts there.
okay, is that I mean, we had a response from the audience that that's per
Yeah,
court
that's
as
exactly
opposed to
right. So
per
if you look at the
facility.
top, yeah, if you look at the top right, it's one court per 5,000.
Okay,
So if you had 10 courts in that place, then that would have a significantly larger
Okay,
service
that
area,
makes sense. Got it. Thank you.
of course. And thank you to whoever's in the audience that answered that too.
Thank you, Mr. Bott. I had, I don't know if these are questions or comments or maybe just things that occurred to me, and I'll read them off and you can respond to those that you have responses for. First was the 8 focus group meetings. If you could provide a little more insight into who those groups were, what the results of those were, and how they factored into the overall conclusions that you made. Maybe a comment on what expectations we can have on the specificity of recommendations. So what should we expect down the road in terms of what the plan will look like? Are these thematic, strategic concepts? Or are we going to get down to very programmatically specific recommendations? That would help me understand it. I'd like your thoughts on how a strategic plan might help adjudicate conflicting use interests. I don't know that we have conflicting use interests, but maybe pickleball tennis would be the closest thing we could come to as some different opinions within the community of how things should be, and maybe you can address how this plan might how the city and the commission and the council might find guidance in the plan, if they can. The next thought I had was if you could address sort of the functional shelf life of the plan. How long is it gonna, this kind of been in the preparation phase for at least a couple of years. By the time I think it's published, it'll have been 4 or 5 years in the making. When would we need to update it or think about updating it? And then lastly, I'm glad that the community indicated sort of a willingness to personally support funding needs. And that's great. But I'm also hoping, or I'm interested in whether the plan can address other creative funding mechanisms besides tax revenue measures, development fees. I know some of those are complicated legally and procedurally, but if you could address some of what might be looked at in terms of funding in addition to a tax measure. So you can, those are the things I'm interested in, and you can address whatever
Sure.
you can address.
I've got them in sequence and I'll address each of them. And Christine, especially with the first one, feel free to add in as well with the focus groups.
Sure.
Those were again based on a broad cross-section of lists that was curated with the help of staff. They are stakeholders, they are thought leaders, they are representative groups across various entities as well. And so from department staff to city staff to external community leaders to also dedicated language-based groups for Spanish and Mandarin as well. That was the broad variety of inputs that we obtained. And as I said, the choices within the survey were influenced by those groups. Normally I may not ask as much for, let's say, native landscaping or trees in my survey questionnaires, but that was very much driven by the Mountain View community's priorities that had us ask them. And I'm glad we did, because as you saw in the survey, the high priority ratings area, both of those actually came up as high priorities too. So it wasn't just a small group of people in that case. it very much was them reflecting the broader community's priorities. Anything to add, Christine, to that one?
I would add that the two stakeholder meetings that were held in Mandarin and Spanish, our city manager's office assisted with getting individuals to participate in that. Many of them may have been graduates from the Spanish Civic Leadership Academy or the Mandarin Civic Leadership Academy, as well as those that are closely engaged with the multicultural engagement group. And then as far as the other stakeholder meetings, we work with a variety of different organization and user groups. And a lot of those individuals were invited to participate, as well as individuals from the variety of different advisory bodies within the city. We did try our best to get just program attendees to participate. We had someone from the senior center, teen center, teens were invited to attend, as well as just general program users that may not fall into one of those user groups.
So those focus groups helped
Mhm.
inform the construct of the survey. Is that what I understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Secondly, in terms of specificity of recommendations, so I mean, as you know, it is a strategic plan and it's a system-wide one, right? So there is certainly the initial focus is on longer term, higher level recommendations. Now, the beauty of this is because as from the very beginning, I remember meeting John and Christine and Brenda early on too, and as we had talked about some initial conversations, once we kicked it off, staff was very clear. We want to combine elements of a master plan and have some site-specific information, which is where WRT's input is going to be really helpful, because not only have they assessed each site as well, when we get into the visioning, we will actually go through with the staff, each site to say, what could be some custom recommendations specific to that site, right? So you all know the neighborhoods better than anybody else. You understand not every park has the same needs. So what might be those tailored ones? So with respect to the parks, and then to certain areas at the level of core program areas, and then with respect to staffing levels and fee and pricing policy levels, that's where we will have specificity of recommendations. But we're not going to be telling staff to offer this program on this day for this much time, these many times a year, right? That's where we leave it to the staff to implement. But it can help identify community priorities, trends, future demographic shifts, and our own assessment itself. So there isn't one single source that will drive it as much as a triangulation of all of those. And while the focus will be on higher level vision, there will be site-specific specificity and a living, breathing action plan where on an annual basis, we expect staff to populate that, make it part of their work plans as well, and then come back and report to you against the performance metrics to say, have we accomplished what we said we would accomplish this year? Does that answer your second question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So then in terms of, as I look at this as well, the shelf life and with the conflicting uses. So the easy one of the shelf life, I would say generally, this is while it's a 10-year vision range, 10, 15 years out, it's really a 5-year update timeline. So even if you look at national accreditation requirements, you'll have been gold medal finalists too. And given the rate of scale of change, right? If you think of plans that were done in January 2020, they were obsolete 90 days later, right? So you're in the heart of innovation base with AI being part of the conversation, something we weren't talking of even 2 years ago, with climate change, with financial situations, all of those being so fluid. It's meant to be a living, breathing plan, and it's meant to be one that you at least update the community input, priorities, demographics, trends every 5 years. For the conflicting uses, now this is where the plan is both art and science, right? We've always said that we want to let the community's values drive the outcomes. As I look at this, there is no doubt that, we've seen 12 years ago when I first heard of pickleball, and as far as we know, recommended the first dedicated pickleball courts in the Parks Master Plan in the country, in Carlsbad at the time. it has grown exponentially, right? It is the fastest growing sport in the country. And there certainly are areas where we see tennis and pickleball conflate. But at the same time, tennis's numbers have also gone up since the pandemic, right? It just is not oftentimes as vocal a group that I would see compared to pickleball, but the numbers are there. So given that example, I would certainly look at, as y'all are making decisions, to see not an either or, but an and solution as you think about it. Where what could go, I think that's why the equity maps, which I know you, as you rightly asked for, could certainly be helpful to better understand, are there areas of overlaps and or areas of gaps where one amenity versus the other could be better served. And it's not just tennis versus pickleball as much as all of them. Dog parks are still a need. Splash pad is also a need. Obviously, small mini parks and neighborhood parks are very much a need. So it's really all of these things put together that you can look at and say, what might be the best use that impacts the greatest number of people positively, and let's do that. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. I think the last one was,
Community support and funding,
well, yeah, other creative funding.
other funding sources, certainly. Yeah. So one thing I will say, and this ties back to the survey response of the perception of value of parks, recreation, trails, open spaces since the pandemic. It has gone up significantly, and we're seeing a much higher level of private and nonprofit support as well. So beyond these, and in addition to, as combined, in the last 2.5 years since we've done these plans, Atlanta passed about $250 million bond, of which $750 million infrastructure bond, of which $250 million was towards parks and trail infrastructure. In addition to which, the community supported an increase in the millage for maintenance budget, doubling that from 8 to 16 million. Locally in Indianapolis, Eli Lilly, the Global Farmer Company's endowment, their foundation, gave the single largest gift in the city's history to fix existing parks, playgrounds, tennis courts, pools, etc., $80 million. We're seeing significantly more interest from corporations that recognize this is now a way to attract people, the quality of life, and to retain good talent, and from hospitals to insurance companies to healthcare providers in general that see us as being preventive maintenance and well-being versus reactive in the future. So again, I don't think there's a single solution as much as this combination of user fees, public support, nonprofit support, and private corporation support as well, that all will lead to longer-term financial sustainability and ways to successfully not just implement to build, but implement to maintain in the future as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I appreciate your bringing coherent organization to my sort of meandering thoughts. And you did, so I appreciate it. With that, let's
make a request. Since this is a presentation, can we get some initial comments from the PRC in addition to the questions that may help the public form some of their questions? So if you have comments now compared to later, that may be helpful.
Further roundup.
I mean, I have comments. I didn't break them out between now or later, but
That's fine.
I guess I'll just make them all now. And maybe I'll have more later. So I guess, let's see. First thought, I thought it was reaffirming that the statistically valid survey results were at least somewhat consistent with the results of the online community survey. So I thought that was good to hear. I felt like there were some common themes in areas like shade cover in parks and playgrounds, restrooms and playgrounds, recreation accessibility, amenities for all age groups, connectivity of pathways and trails, and walkability of cities. So I thought all those things were, came out in the survey, and I think those are consistent with some of the things I've heard over time. I it did strike me in looking at the slides at the end that, on pictures of the new parks that look like they're completely without shade. That's true. But in some of those cases, there are trees that, we planted trees and there was intent of having shade, but it's just gonna, on the new parks, it's gonna take a while and that's unfortunate. I wish we could move 20 years into the future on some of those trees, but it's gonna take a while. I'm sort of hoping that at some point in the future, we'll be able to see more detailed data for some of the survey responses, sort of drilling down to the next level. So for example, in priorities for investment, there were about 20 amenities listed in the middle and the high tiers. And presumably there's possibly a sizable gap between those that are closest to the top in a tier and those that are closest to the bottom of the tier. And it would be helpful to see further data differentiating, so we can actually see the differentiation between all the elements in those tiers. From the statistically valid survey data, I thought that it would be very instructive to be able to look at the subset of responses from those living in neighborhoods that are underserved by parkland, to see what their top priorities are for parks and park amenities. I think it's my understanding that from the statistically valid survey that that data is captured and because where the surveys went out to and where they came back from. But I'd like to see the responses from people in those areas that aren't served by parkland, as opposed to just the general response rate for the entire city. Maybe it's the same, but I'd like to hear what those people say. And then finally, again, I like the graphic on the equity map circles. I think that's instructive. I presume that, I don't know, that 25,000 is a number that you picked for a reason, but I presume that you could make that 10,000 and it's just hitting a keystroke or something like that. And I'd have to look at it more to know the value between different population size elements in looking at the circles. But I think that it's a nice way to look at how things are spread out. So those are my initial. Right?
Yes, thank you. I'm actually a little confused now about which of my comments I should make now. You've gotten me confused.
I have none left, so.
Yeah, you can provide all of them at this time.
All right, so I have two levels of comments. I'll start by saying that I'm greatly looking forward to those equity maps. I think that that'll be a wonderful resource for us to have. I'm very interested in them. At the same time, I really question the high percentage of residents are 10 minutes walk away from a park. That just doesn't, I'm lucky in my neighborhood. I have a small mini park, 5 minutes walk. But my sense of the city is that there's lots and lots of people who do not have a 10-minute pleasant walk to a park. So I'll be interested in seeing some more of that data. A very basic question for me is the use of the word amenities. I've because we're kind of getting the information after you've asked the questions, it's difficult to judge what amenities means. So for example, on one of the slides, slide 47, functionality, there was a mention of basic amenities for parks. And I'd like more information about that. I mean, and not right now, but when we get the recommendations, I want to know what basic amenities means. Is it restrooms? Is it a play structure? Is it a tree with a bench to sit under it? Those are all, the word amenities is very broad and I don't know what it means. I had some concerns about the sensitive lighting, what you said, Nile, or maybe it was you, Diksha, but reassured me very much. So I don't have questions about that anymore. Just to add the fact that we are trying to go in the dark skies direction. But I think you understand that. So good. I'm glad about that. So I'll just continue with my comments. For me, I see the recreation plan and the parks and open space plan as separate entities, and John and Christine are smiling because I probably said it to them any number of times. I think the recreation part, congratulations to staff. The public really seems to appreciate what you're offering. I think it's wonderful. You've worked very hard on it, and I think from what you have presented to us so far, I think there will be good actionable data for staff to be able to move ahead and take it from good to excellent or very good to superlative. And I think we're good in that. I mean, there's questions about looking at what our demographics actually are. The number of families with young children is so low. I mean, I know it, and every time I see the number, it surprises me afresh, like 20% or 25%. I mean, most of us aren't children or don't have children. So that's something to take into account. And the question of affordability is, I think, also very important. It wasn't mentioned that much in the responses, but when I looked at our offerings, some of the costs for classes just really shocked me. So we need to work some more on that. So for the recreation part, I think it's the direction is good. There's improvements, and there'll be clear actions that staff can take. For the parks and open space, I don't think it's a question of let's just do more. To me, for the parks and open space is a rethinking of how we look at parks. So it's no longer, I mean, we basically have tried to have equity maps and see neighborhoods that are underserved and say, as much as possible, we should have a mini park at least in every neighborhood. But I think with climate change and with, densification, we need to look at parks and open space as a basic infrastructure matter. And it's not just more of what we have, but rethinking matters. And so in this case, the visioning strikes me as really critical. And I think we need more than the responses of 450 residents, because council has talked about biodiversity, about livability, and parks and open space are all part of that, and health and equity and the ability of people to basically traverse the city. You can't have even active transportation. So that is a part that worries me about getting the results and then doing visioning. A certain amount of visioning has already happened, and more of the same, or even a lot more of the same, I don't think will get us there. That's my kind of philosophical, a place where I'm worried philosophically about where we're going. It's more like a paradigm change. We need to look at it differently. It's not just on community services, it's on community development, it's in public works. It's a different way of looking at these issues. And I'd love to hear your comments on that, Neely, where there is room to add this aspect of visioning where it's going to happen in this context. And let me just have a look and see if I finished. Yes, and those were my comments.
Okay, so I would think differently with respect to separating programs from parks and open space, because we've always, as we've looked at this, thought of how program needs can drive future park and space design. Having said that, there will be an element of a standalone recreation program plan. We're just focused on the programming element because it's also a requirement for national accreditation. So we will be doing that as a standalone, and we will be weaving that as a part of the overall plan's needs as well, as we have staff think of programs and events, of staffing, of operations and maintenance, of parks, of trails and connectivity, and of funding and marketing as well. So part of the thing, as we see with the strategic plan, is not to have silos, but rather have all these different elements interact and in some ways intersperse with each other in order to have a well-functioning and, in my experience, a successfully implemented plan. So that's what we'd be looking at as we go through this as well. Again, I think we're not there at the visioning yet, partly because for some of the key things you mentioned, we don't have a great level of service awareness. We're finalizing that. We don't have the equity maps that we're finalizing that. So I can tell you a vision is to have a park in, let's say, every single neighborhood within a 10-minute walk. But till I do the equity maps, till you look at your level of service, is that realistic, or is it just a bunch of words on paper? And what we don't want to give you is a plan that looks pretty, sounds fancy, and that you can't implement. So therein lies the balance, right? Like we talked in the very beginning too, it's the baking the cake part. We all want the final cake, but I've got to get the ingredients together along the way and put it in the oven to bake it for the right amount of time to get it there. And we're over the hump in terms of the majority of the initial public input, in terms of the majority of the assessment work. I'd say we're probably in the 6th or the 7th inning of a baseball game, and we're getting into that final stage where things are going to start coming together.
So let me pick up on something you said. And I've lived in this country for 40+ years, and baseball still isn't comprehensible to me. Soccer I can manage, but baseball is beyond my ability to understand, no matter what my family has tried to do. You were saying something about programming driving park design, and the way I look at it is different, and that's what I meant by a paradigm change. I think open space is part of our ability to survive during climate change, is part of our mental health. You know, forest bathing, or at least one oak tree bathing, given the kind of environment we live in. And that's my concern, that parks and open space, we need the programs, but there is more to it than program driven.
Agreed, 100%. And maybe I think I agree with you, and I see that nuance where there is open space for conservation and at the very best some passive use, and there's open space that is more actively programmed and designed like parks for a little more active use, right? So the shoreline, and a large component of that is very much the open space, but a rank store for Cuesta Park is parkland that is much more actively programmed. So therein lies, that's what I see more of the programming driving needs, is more in the Cuestas or the rank store to some degree, but not as much in the shorelines, where I agree. I think you still have to have that balance of open space as well.
So we have a disagreement here. And hopefully in the plan we can, I'm gonna make one comment and then I'll stop. I think open space is a requirement, a constant requirement. Like planter strips that are biodiversity focused, like walking into a neighborhood park, and it's not just about running around, it's about, a impressive percentage of our population is not at the running around age anymore. We need a tree, we need a butterfly, we need flowers. Not to drive or take a bus or shuttle to North Bay Shore, but in our neighborhood where we live, to me, that's not programmed, that just is, and that's a place where we can be. And that's my concern. And there we go. All right, I'll stop now.
I just had a question that touches maybe on the fringe element of Ranit's, and that's if we could be reminded again, or if we've ever, if we know yet, how the biodiversity and urban forestry plan is going to coalesce with this plan. I mean, I know that we had responses a year or two ago about, do we have more clarity on how those two are gonna work together or be merged or coalesce?
Neely, I'll take the lead on that one and then you can
Yeah.
fill in as needed. So I'll start with the Parks and Rec strategic plan of being able to look at some themes for parks and what we heard from the community already in the surveys of biodiversity, trees, shade, those types of things. But where are those most needed? Even in Diksha's analysis talked about maybe reviving some of the vegetation into more natives. But then from the flip side, coming from the biodiversity plan, it's more a matter of what those could be, more specific. What is the plant palette? How could these areas of the parks then integrate into some of the active transportation plan elements and otherwise? So I see this as more of a higher level for the specificity, but acknowledging the need for the biodiversity within those areas. Neely or Christine?
Nope.
I think it'll also lean on the maintenance standards that may be required to keep up the biodiverse areas that will be identified through that strategy. So there's that overlap as well, because the Parks and Recreation Strategic Plan will be looking at what is our staffing maintenance standards. But if we all of a sudden are changing X number amounts of vegetation into biodiverse planting, what is that going to change? Do we need more staffing? Do we need specialized equipment? Do we need more bodies, whatever it may be? So there is also that overlap and tie when it comes to maintenance and operations.
I presume the tree canopy elements of that plan are citywide. It's not just
Correct.
parks.
Mhm.
That would seem to interplay a little bit with maybe some of the stuff you're talking about, but
Yeah, I can provide a little more insight on that. So for example, we've worked with SFEI in the past where they look at the biodiversity element, and some things that they look at is, for example, the heat island impact in a city, the tree cover in a city, any climate change impacts from sea level rise, etc. So then we can take those elements when we're doing park system planning, saying, okay, like this area has too much heat impact. We can see whether that's a park deficit area, whether we should plan for more a green space there that can have a lot of tree cover to sort of offset those kind of impacts. So that's one way where those two can sort of interface together. Also, when we start seeing they can also tell us, like, with climate change, what kind of like transitions are happening. And so what kind of like planting strategy changes we might want to have in certain parks, which might be like more impacted than the other parks. Those are some of the ways we've worked together in the past with them in terms of biodiversity.
I will get to you next.
That's fine.
But I wanted to chime in,
Go
just
ahead.
picking up on the prior conversation, just in hoping it's kind of a nomenclature issue. From my time as a landscape architect and planner, the term programming inferred a catalyst for design elements or planning decisions, not necessarily active use programming. So a programmatic decision doesn't mean an active use. So I want to agree with Commissioner Bryant that what I think she's getting at is some open space decisions and being concerned about programming being the first point of decision. And I'm hoping this is really a nomenclature issue and you're using programming to talk about the broader planning construct.
Yes, so when I would maybe, for example, talk about programming, I would like side with the definition that you just quoted, right? Where we're talking about like element design versus when Neil is talking about it, he's talking more from like active use standpoint.
Yeah, us landscape architects think alike. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Felios.
And I'm gonna just piggyback, it was always and John, thank you for what you said about the biodiversity plan, because I don't see it as just a parks related thing. I see it as a citywide thing that as we plan as the planning department or public works or other departments have projects going on, that plan be part of their vision moving, but I would say vision, their actions moving forward. It's not just related to parks. Parks obviously would be a part of the biodiversity, but it's not limited to just parks. And so I just wanted to add my 2 cents worth in on that.
Chime in on that real quick. And just as a reminder
Sure.
to go along with what you're saying is while CSD and even Brenda, who's on the line right now, is taking the lead as for the strategy or the plan, the biodiversity plan, each of the other departments are at the table and part of the team that is bringing this plan forward. So every department has skin in the game, is at the table. And so that, yes, it is a true citywide plan, integrating not only the Parks and Rec strategic plan, but also the active transportation.
Thank you. The other things I wanted to piggyback a little bit on the inventory of parks. I'll be somewhere in some document moving forward. It'd be interesting for us to be able to see what your inventory showed and what you like said, this park's great, this park needs this or whatever, that's shared with us as well. Going way back to the 90s on one of our earlier plans, when I was on the Parks and Rec Commission earlier, we actually toured all the parks and made our own list of, what was wrong with this one or what was great about this one, et cetera. So I just like to see what your group came up with regards to that for each of our 45 areas that you inventoried. And looking forward to that. One other thing too would be, and I had to compliment Commissioner Bryan. She's brought this forward before, but this should have a maintenance aspect when we move forward with the plan. I know it wasn't really part of the inventory that we spoke about tonight, but just while I can say it now, as you start going forward with other things, that there should be a big maintenance element with regards to and how we allocate dollars towards maintenance and moving forward with whether it's the swimming pools of the future or the parks that we have, et cetera. Also, I hope there'll be some recommendations moving forward on how to move from good to excellent. That's a great goal, and I think it should be. I mean, you always want to strive for excellence in no matter what part of your life. But I hope you will be able to provide us, with your knowledge from other cities on how do we move from good to excellent and just things moving forward. And then finally, just want to thank you for all your work, the multiple meetings with all the stakeholders and everyone. I think that, and staff compliment you. It's hard to get a lot of people to go ahead and give opinions and participate in surveys. And I thought we've accomplished that very well. So looking forward to the next steps. And I want to thank all of you, whether staff, or Neely, your staffs as well. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well said. Picking up on your comment about the inventory documentation, yes, please date things also. I've had some issue with some of the documentation and not knowing what's currently. My fellow commissioners have really brought up all the really good points, and I've already conveyed things that are somewhere between a comment and a question. So I'll just leave one final comment, which is the work plan, the timeline diagrams kind of showed that draft recommendations dot, you know, and I'm very interested in completing the plan by Q1 25, as everyone else is. But I also probably am of a belief that some iteration is going to be required, you know, when those draft recommendations come out. I think we'll hear more good comments and more input, and it just feels like more than one dot on the calendar to me. So with that, let's yes.
One additional comment, building on what Commissioner Filio said. When I looked at your the park ranking, which were, you know, excellent, which were fair, your excellent ones, some of them I wholeheartedly agree, and some I was very surprised at. So when it comes back to us, I would love to see what you use, what your criteria were for ranking. You have like the four major headlines for, but I'd like to see, you know, the questions you ask and the range you give people to choose really determines the answers. So I'd like to be able to understand more, and just I hope this comes back to us and to the public before we get the final recommendations. That there are some in-between steps. This is very interesting, and the next, your maps, I know we all greatly look forward to, and the discussion that will come from that. So I hope that is part forward.
Thank you. With that, let's turn to public comment. Thank you all public for your patience while we get to you. Allison, do we have anybody online that wishes to address the commission?
Not at this time.
Okay. I think we have at least two people here in person, and maybe we'll start with Jim Sirwat.
All my notes are on the back.
Thank you. My comment is more in the form of questions, because I'm a little confused.
So that's fine. Just please know that neither the commission or staff will.
Okay, so where, I didn't understand coming from, Neely, thank you. Good to see you again. I don't understand the scope of the strategic plan. And I agree very much with what Ronit was saying in terms of we have to come up with a new paradigm. Because if land costs 10 million an acre, we have to count the ability for people to walk comfortably, or the people to ride their bike to shoreline better, or to get to the senior center in a way that's safe, or to be able to participate in programs differently better. So if that's going to mean integrating active transportation, and if it's going to mean integrating in shade and things like that, I don't know that just having a thing that says more people like pickleball than splash pads is going to get us there. And so I don't really know what the scope is of this plan and where and how this plan integrates with a bigger vision for what the city is going to look like and how we get to that city. Because if it doesn't, I find it restraining, because everybody's been there where 6 years later, the city council says, well, that wasn't in the plan. And yeah, it really wasn't, but it wasn't within the scope of the plan. So it's a question, but it's a question is, what is the scope of this plan? Is the scope of this plan, like you say, the things that are good for your heart in the city of Mountain View, and how do we make Mountain View a better place? Or is the scope of this plan, how do we take our existing parks and add amenities? And if we don't have existing parks, how do we get existing parks in places that we don't have park equity? So that's kind of like question number one for me is, how do we do this? Question number two that you can't answer is, what is the intended duration of this plan? I think we started this plan in 2022, or maybe even earlier, maybe 2021. So it took 4 years, as Neely would say, to get the cake to this level of baking. So 4 years, is it a 5-year plan? Is it a 10-year plan? And with that in mind, how do we integrate the suggestions that we're making so that it lasts for 10 years and it also integrates to the other departments? So those are my questions and that's my input. I know you can't answer it, but I agree with a lot of what the commissioners were saying in terms of that we have to think more broadly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zarowski. Staff or the consultant may respond to things, but just as a matter of protocol, we don't take questions.
Well,
But
thank you.
you may have stimulated some interest in making other comments. Mr. Lambert?
So my name is Bill Lambert. I live in the Montaloma neighborhood. I've been a resident of Mountain View for about 20 years now. So this is a rare opportunity to be able to speak after the commissioner's comments. And I actually find that very useful because it allows us to reflect a little bit more in the audience that give some comments. I didn't prepare anything tonight. So like often happens when people don't prepare, you leverage off of what other people said. I really, as everybody's giving a lot of love to Commissioner Bryant tonight, I think she was absolutely right on in many of her comments. What is really needed is a vision statement and ideas of what we really want to accomplish and want our community look like, not just 10 years from now, but 50 years from now, because this is going to be a long-term effort. And I hope it is something like that. One thing you said, Mr. Bott, was you didn't want the goals to be unrealistic. I actually want the goals to be unrealistic, okay? Because that means they're stretch goals. That means they are a vision. There are no unrealistic goals. The goal should be is what kind of parks and open space and recreational programs do we need to see to serve our community, all age groups, from the youngest child to the oldest adult, okay, at different times in their lives. And having accessibility, walkability, however you want to call it, I think we need some different words here, is very important in Mountain View. The time I've lived here for 20 years, what we've seen is the city grow tremendously. Right now, we have a huge transportation problem in the city. It might appear that you're only 10 minutes walking away, but because of the traffic, you just can't get there. So I like the idea of the tennis person earlier on saying something about we want a community model. And I want to give you one example to really think about, and that is the Montaloma Field area. I think the reason the community fought so hard for that open space, we're no different than anybody else in Mountain View, but we were lucky to have that open space there that is used for dogs. It is used for frisbees. It uses for kids learning how to ride their bicycles, for sunbathers, for birthday parties. This wide open area is used for so many things. Plus it has grass and green space and trees. And I think that's where the issue, we start talking about amenities and programming, yeah, that's what landscapers do. That's what park planners do. That's their job. But then everything gets filled up with stuff, right? And versatile spaces, when we don't have very much land, that's what we really want to maximize and not lock ourselves into specific uses. I guess that's all I have to say, but I think the biggest thing I think when we say we're near a park space, okay, no, what we need to ask ourselves, is it a usable is it a usable space for age-appropriate activities throughout families' lives and people's lives that they can enjoy and treasure? Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah.
I'll sneak in there. Hi, I'm Celia Paymer. Agree with all those things. On the nitty-gritty side, I think kind of taking off what Bill said, I would like to, one, make the maps consistent. If you're gonna say, hey, we want a map of dedicated pickleball courts, let's also see a map of dedicated soccer fields. There aren't any. Everyone else shares. And so as a result, I'd also like to see a heat map of all the different ways a space could be used. And then we know if we're gonna add, quote, add an amenity, how many uses are we removing? If, for instance, the comment earlier today talked about taking space from Cuesta Annex, that is a space with some native trees. Well, it has native trees. I would love more native plants there. It is a place where people walk their dogs. It is the place where the El Camino Hospital employees do their laps. It is the place where kids get nature play. Our kids' friends call it the dinosaur park because it's one of the few places they can play in a place that feels wild. So those are 5 or 6 uses that we would replace with 1 use. And I think that that's important to see in a map and be able to see, are we increasing the usage of the area? Are we decreasing it by locking it into 1 use? And if we want to lock something in 1 use, that's why we're saying find another paved space. Let's take a gray area and make it blue instead of taking like a really hot area that's used a lot and making it blue. I want to also consider our city's struggle with water features in the past. How much was it to refinish that fountain out front after it was turned off? Was that 20 grand? I don't remember. 50 grand?
Not our department.
It wasn't cheap. I remember that at a city council meeting. And so if these water features are going to be turned off for years, are they going to be able to be maintained? Are they going to be able to function? I know that the water feature, it's tiny in Bub Park, but that was off for what, 6 years? So I don't know, but keep that in mind. We live in a drought. And then also kind of tying back to what Ronit said, I think another way to frame that mindset is that these are, you know, it's come up a lot recently, third places. We got our first place at home, our second place at work, and we need these third places. And as a result, they don't need to all be programmed. People want a space where they can meet, eat at 0 cost and quiet enough for conversation, where they can have families come together and people come together. And it is good to have programming as one of the options, but there's a lot of time people are looking for places to just be with other people. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Here we go.
any other comments from the public here? Neely, I don't know about the other 200 plans that you've done, but I would put the community of Mountain View in terms of the quality and thoughtfulness of input up against any of them.
I would too. I would too.
Appreciate the input, and I hope you're getting a lot out of it.
May I make a quick comment?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you wanted to respond to anything you've heard.
Yeah, not to the opinions or the ideas. I think all of those are appropriate for each one. I just want to rectify something that's factually incorrect in terms of the plan's timelines thus far. We kicked the plan off in August 2023, August 21st to be specific. So the plan's been about 10 months in the making, not 2.5 years, at least in terms of our kickoff. And based on its timeline.
You were late to the party.
I don't want to be in a CNN debate where we don't fact check things that are being said. So I do want to be mindful of that as well. And we are on track for the 18-month timeline like we talked about, which will be Q1 of next year. So we're on track, on timelines as we'd spoken about.
Thank you. Any staff comments on anything on this item?
Nope, everything has
Okay,
been
I
shared.
am going to give one last pass to the commission if there's last comments before we close this item down.
Yeah, I mean, my only comment, when I look at the time frame, I mean, I would love it to be done by Q1 of 2025, but I could be obviously proven wrong. I hope I'm maybe proven wrong, but I just, there's a lot of work in terms of whether PRC and the public is going to have involvement in this. You know, I mean, we've requested a lot of things tonight just to be able to see more data and to see other I mean, you know, we're not going to meet again until I mean, we'll see, I guess, but I just a little with Ronit, I mean, we want to be involved and we want the public to have opportunities to see things maybe in greater detail and be involved and you know, there may be a roadmap that PRC is going to see this on this date and this on this date and this on this date, but I also know the way we work sometimes, you know, we don't resolve something at that one meeting, that we need more information or something like that. So anyway, I can't change the end date if that's set in stone, but I hope that there's room for sufficient room to to interface and to really make this something that everybody feels good about, as opposed to something that's maybe rushed and we didn't see something or something like that. So,
Prosecutor Commissioner Fletcher, any last thoughts?
No, Neil, I don't, when we talked about when this started, when I got on the PRC, must have been 3 years ago, it was moving forward already, and I really wanted to be involved in it and participate, and nothing to do with you, it's taken time, so you can see how involved our community is, and we want, as you want, to have this the best possible plan, and
Agreed.
I agree with Commissioner Mitchell. If it takes a little longer, and we know that we worked with you, you worked with staff, we worked with the community, this is really good, we can move forward from here. I would not say, oh, those consultants, they didn't manage the time exactly.
And we've said that to staff from the very beginning. We're not here to check boxes. We want to do what's right. So it's the same thing with number of meetings, and it's the same thing with the process. It's the balance between, being said, how long did the plan take for you to do, and doing it in a way that allows enough engagement, right? And it's always the yin yang of those two. So rest assured, we will continue coming in front of you and the community to share the input. And staff will keep everybody in the loop as well as they have thus far.
Nothing else? Nope.
Okay, great. With that, we'll close agenda item 5 and go to agenda item 6, which are staff announcements.
Bye,
Updates.
Neely. Bye, Diksha. Thank you so much.
So
Bye-bye.
we can let them go.
Yeah, they get to
Bye.
go. He's 3 hours ahead.
And committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the commission at this time. Any reports?
Absolutely.
Good.
Busiest time of year. So here we are, July 1. We're actually, let's say, at the midsummer mark almost for us. Summer for us actually started the first week of June with all of our programs going into full swing. If you stop by the community center, for example, or Ringsdorf Park, you'll see over 125, 130 kids running around in the park doing camps, as well as probably another 200 kids inside the building doing different STEM activities and programs. So it's a very busy place right now. And with that, we are going into a heat wave this week, as you're all probably aware. Starting tomorrow and also on Wednesday, we will be providing free recreation swim as the temperatures will be above 95 degrees or higher. And so that is for our residents only. Non-residents are still welcome to come. They still have to pay the regular rate, but Mountain View residents that show up during recreation swim will be able to swim for free tomorrow and Wednesday. We'll be taking a look at Thursday's forecast tomorrow and reviewing to ensure it still is over 95. And if so, we'll offer a free rec swim on July 4th. So that is something that we instituted maybe
2-3 years ago. Oh, man.
Oh, no.
More than that.
pandemic.
Yeah, gosh.
7-8 years ago, maybe. And we've only had to do it a few times. So this will be fun to do it 2 or 3 times this week. And leading from free rec swim to another aquatics update. So the Ringsdorf Park Aquatic Center is delayed. I know, Joe, sorry. Can't say it's opening this date. That is still an unknown factor. If you are to walk by the site, drive by the site, it looks like it is ready to rock and roll and open tomorrow. However, if you look in the mechanical room, it is not ready to go. So as you are aware, this is an all-electric heating facility, including the pool water system. And as they were commissioning the building water and the pool heating system, they discovered that there were some things that weren't designed as planned. And so we're in the process of having the contractor go back and redo some work, but that amount of work is a significant delay. And with that, we've had to cancel not only the first session of swim lessons, but we did have to move forward with session 2 and session 3. Good news, there's only 3 sessions. So the other good news is half of the swim lessons we were able to move to Eagle, and then the other half we had to cancel. The ones that we had to cancel on, we did provide each of the families 2 free recreation swim passes for their entire family, so at least they can try to get into the water. But moving programs over to Eagle, that did require us to truncate or shrink some of the other existing programs like lap swim or recreation swim to be able to accommodate everything. We're also doing a lot of concurrent uses right now. So Eagle Pool, just like Rank Surf Park, really alive and happening. There is not even enough time for us to actually maintain the pool. And it is a hop in place from 5 a.m. until about 8, 9, 10 p.m. every day. But we are hoping that we will get some updates over the next few weeks with the Rank Surf Park Aquatic Center that will give us a more definitive. The good news is there's possibility I might be able to receive temporary occupancy, which would allow us to get our staff in there and start training and getting used to the facility, which is extremely important for me. I don't want to open day one and my staff don't know where to go grab a backboard, for example, or where to let fire in. Those are very significant trainings for us. And so this might allow us that time to be properly trained so that when we open, we're ready to go. But as soon as we have an opening date, we'll make sure to share it with the commission. My last update is just to round out the number of events that are taking place. And it's just wild. So every Friday we have the concerts on the plaza right outside the door right here. If you haven't been out there yet, they're very well attended. We have a rock and roll band this Friday. I forget the name of them, but I'm looking forward to seeing what attendance is like on July 5th. It's always a slower week, so maybe look next week. We've been continuing to do music on Castro every Wednesday. It's on the 200 block. And then we have our final kid stock coming up on July 20th. And then starting off this Friday is the first summer outdoor movie night of the series for the summer. We'll be playing Super Mario Brothers at Cuesta Park. And then, I didn't have this originally in my notes, but starting next Friday, there are 3 events every Friday for the rest of the summer. So if you really want to make the most of it, you can go to Friday night recreation swim over at Eagle Pool, hop over here for a concert, and then go see a movie in the park. So we have an entire evening planned for the community. If you want to do all 3, 1 or 2, that's up to them. But it's our busiest time of year, and the staff are doing a fantastic job with the programs that they've developed, the events that they have planned. And as you can see from the previous item, we have a lot of community support on the recreation program side. So it's been a great summer. See what the rest of it has in store for us.
Allison, would you mind bringing Brenda up?
Cool.
I wasn't sure if she was going to be on tonight. Provide a couple updates.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Good evening, commissioners and staff and audience. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update. Before I provide an update on biodiversity, I do want to mention that Cuesta Park now has a new fitness area amenity that is open to the public. It's been 3 years in the making, a little over. We're very excited about it. So please go check it out. It's a joint venture with El Camino Hospital, and we're excited to open that to the community and make it available. I think there's 8 pieces of fitness equipment that are out there. Also wanted to mention, thank you for those that stopped by the Biodiversity and Urban Forest Plan pop-up at the Farmers Market. It was packed from the get-go. It was great turnout, really cool. I'm excited to hear some of the feedback from the consultants. We have a meeting with them, I think tomorrow or the next day. I also want to thank PRC members, Michener and Felios, for taking the time today with the 2-on-1 with SFEI to provide feedback and input about the survey. While we haven't met with SFEI just yet, we're going to wait till all of you have your one-on-one meetings. I did read some of the notes and really, really great, thoughtful feedback. I appreciate the time that you took to really look at that survey and provide some thoughtful input that we can incorporate. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, our next event for the Biodiversity and Urban Forest Plan is scheduled for July 18th. That's our first public workshop. We're offering a 4 to 5 p.m. virtual option, and then 6 to 7 p.m. will be in person at the community center. Looking forward to that.
Thank you, Ms. Sylvia. Any other staff reports?
Good.
Final comments?
Just very quickly, wanted to congratulate staff on the games on Castro Street. They are so popular, you know, I'm there like once or twice a day at least, and somebody's always playing the corn, whatever they're called, and different ages. I mean, just really wonderful.
We appreciate that.
And
We'll pass that along to staff.
I hope you're adding some more also to the other blocks, but it really activates that. People are always sitting there. Great job, thank you.
We have some interesting interactive elements coming up that Brenda has brought to the table that she's seen at some conferences and things that she's been at, and Tim is always looking for new ideas. So more to come for sure.
Just like to compliment staff on getting Eagle Park Pool back up so quickly. I got the email at home.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, by the way, we're shut down.
That's
And then it didn't seem like maybe 10 hours later, we're back up, so.
With a drive out to Livermore to go pick up some parts, and thankfully we have some staff on that are very talented with our maintenance. We were able to get back online. It was definitely a stressor knowing we were having some chlorine issues. And going into such a heat wave of a week, it was a big stressor for us. So
Well done.
kudos to the staff for sure. Yeah.
All right, I believe our next scheduled meeting is September 11th, so have a great summer, everybody. Thanks very much to those of you online and here in person for participating. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 7:51.